I do feel like a lot of directors only become really cognizant of sound because they have at least one project where it was awful. Chuck, what is a crucial but almost always overlooked aspect of any visual medium?
The importance of sound and music.
Welcome to Indie Film Podcast. I'm Victoria.
And I am Chuck. For the past several weeks, we've been talking about the 7 deadly sins of low-budget filmmaking.
So this has included things like weak stories, lack of rehearsals, uninspired art department, and poor shot design.
And this week, we're talking about my favorite subject and what I personally think is the deadliest of all the deadly sins, and that's neglecting your film's sound.
All right, Chuck, what would you say are the top 3 mistakes that you hear in indie films most often?
Well, I want to say number 1 is unnatural sounding dialogue, which lately has been due to people over cleaning their dialogue with AI tools. The next thing is absent sound effects. And also the third would be just a bad mix overall, like an unbalanced sound mix.
And I think it's hilarious that if you had asked me 5 years ago what I would have thought, I would have said that weird tinny noise that you get when you use the noise reduction tool in Adobe Premiere Audition a little bit too heavily.
Yes.
And they kind of sound like they're talking in a tin can.
Yep.
But that was the closest thing we had to AI noise or like AI cleanup or noise reduction at the time.
Yeah, now it sounds just kind of like people are talking from underwater.
Yeah.
Or if you get clean dialogue, it can sound like they're just too boomy, like they're talking on a podcast rather than chatting in an actual room.
And nobody wants to listen to podcast audio.
No, not in a movie, unless your movie's about podcasting.
I guess that's fair.
So I want to tell everybody before we get into this episode that I am 100% self-trained. I'm not an audio engineer, but I've been working in film audio now for the last 11 years, I want to say, was when I took a deep dive into it. YouTube University, and then also picking the brain of actual trained experts when I've had the opportunity.
Which is a fantastic way to learn.
It's worked for me, I think. The only problem is I kind of like have a Swiss cheese knowledge base where there's certain things I don't know. There's a lot more unknowns. Yeah. Because I'm only dealing with problems as they come up. So all my experience, though, is in indie filmmaking. I've never done anything where it's like obviously AAA budget, super high torque and sound design and action movies or anything like that.
That's fair.
So
I think that's a solid disclaimer. So then you have a general process, though, that you've developed over these 11 years that you do use.
Yes.
To kind of go through and work a film's sound, edit a film's sound, mix a film's. I don't know the right vernacular here.
All of it. This is. I broke it down into 6 steps, and I ran it by a couple of the pros that I do know in the region, and they gave me the thumbs up. They're like, Chuck, this is exactly what I do too, which was nice. So these are the 6
validating.
Yes, these are the 6 steps to the best possible sound for your film, and this is in order. Number 1 is clean location sound. Number 2 is balanced dialogue. Number 3 is a realistic soundscape. Number 4 is clever sound design. 5, natural ADR. And 6, a unique score. Okay. And you asked me a question before this episode, and you said, well, what if I have the score ahead of time? I'm talking about this is the order that I do the sound start to finish. And so the last thing to go into the actual sound mix for me is the score for the film.
Okay, so if I'm writing something and in the actual script I put, and this is a needle drop for this song, then that's probably still okay because it's not actually building it yet.
Yeah. So don't ignore your score. Okay. I guess that's the important thing there.
You're allowed to think about it at any point when you're making your movie. Just don't.
Yeah, but if you're DIYing it, try not to put your score in too soon while you're doing the mix because it's going to cover some things cover up some problems that might pop up later.
Okay.
So do you want to just kind of break down each of these in order that I gave them?
I was really hoping you would.
Cool.
Yes, please.
So clean location sound, obviously that is the number 1 thing that you want to grab. And
location sound is strictly referring to everything that you're capturing while you're filming, right?
Yes. You want to get all the dialogue clean for your script on set if possible.
Okay.
And the best way to do that is to just close the gap. If you're in a loud environment, is to close the gap between the microphone and the actors or talents or the sound source.
Okay.
right? Like just get it as close as possible to their mouths. So
Without being visible.
yes, without being visible. That's important because you don't want to have to edit out or rotoscope out a boom pole. But the example that the most difficult sound that I've ever captured was actually from your short film Dive.
You're welcome.
And it was because we were in an incredibly loud environment.
Yeah.
We were at a bar. There were fridges and freezers running, and they were
Fans and HVAC.
Yes,
Additional ventilation for the kitchen.
yes. And when you're shooting indie film, that's just going to be something that you deal with, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so for that one, the nice thing is that we were using anamorphic lenses, and so I could get in closer on the top to the actors' mouths.
Nice.
And so I just tried to get the boom mic as close as I possibly could to the sound source to eliminate the noise in that way. And then anytime we got in on a close-up, it was nice the way that you shot it, there was a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
And so if I needed to pull lines of dialogue from a different take or a different setup, I could do that. The only thing that
Nice.
throws it off is if you have an actor that gives you a very different take every single time.
Yeah.
That can throw off the dialogue, obviously.
Which, from a director's perspective, I don't think is bad necessarily, though I do kind of like that. I like that idea that your multiple takes are to try to get different direction and different moments and different takes on it. But then once you find one that really fits and really feels right, get an extra take or two of that one.
Yes.
Just so you get nice, clean audio, great visuals. You never know, something bumped the camera, just tweaked a little bit. Who knows? Who knows? Whatever happened.
Yeah, and if you have a lot going on in the scene and you can't get the microphone close enough, you can definitely ask your director for an audio-only take.
Yeah.
And that has helped me in the past.
But you just said ask your director. Does that mean that the sound people need to maybe step up a little bit every once? I'm not saying they need to do more because sound people do a whole lot.
Oh, yeah.
But sound people are very important, and location sound recordists need to feel empowered to tell the director when something didn't
Oh,
work.
yeah. And I always complain. But the problem is I've worked with directors where they're just oblivious.
Yeah.
And so definitely be listening if you're a director and you're just starting out. And you can get Bluetooth wireless dongles very inexpensively online. Find something they're just Bluetooth transmitters.
Okay.
And usually a sound person's bag will have a line out if it's not plugged directly into the camera.
Nice.
And then you can get just take your headphones, plug it into the receiver end on that. You put the transmitter on the sound bag and listen closely
Nice.
to what's happening. Because when your sound person is like, oh, there's, whatever, the motorcycle that we drove past was way too loud. One, it was. And so don't minimize that.
No.
And two, you're gonna be doing a lot of extra work in post instead of just trying to get that line clean or trying to get that take clean so that you can insert it later on. So yeah, location sound, definitely get all the lines that you need for the film, and then also get as many of the sound effects on set as possible. Like for Dive again, for example, the pouring of the whiskey.
Oh, yeah.
I got that in the environment.
Oh, yeah.
I set up, and I'm going to go into that a little bit later on as like a trick, but like set up mics to capture everything that I possibly could on set so that I was getting the natural sound environment rather than having to insert Foley later.
And that it sounds more realistic. I mean,
Yeah.
Of course it sounds more realistic. It's literally the actual thing that was happening there. Because you could have gotten the sound of a beverage pouring,
Yes.
but it wouldn't have been this viscosity pouring from this particular spout into this exact container with this exact much echo and hand around it.
And I've done it myself where I've inserted those that I've captured later as Foley, and they don't sound as good.
Though you've done a good job recreating a lot of it, though, and for example, the Lawful Evil that we just did.
Yes, the
we
musical,
went through and added in some additional sound to that, but you went back to the exact location, set everything up the exact same way, used the exact same props to make those sounds happen again.
Yeah, that was a musical though. That's totally different because we were just playing the music and the actors were lip syncing. So basically it was going to be impossible to get audio on set that was clean. So I had anticipated if we want environmental sounds, I'd have to go back and Foley them in.
Which is fair.
So
okay.
I want to talk about the next thing, which is dialogue.
Okay.
So after everything's synced up in post, right? So you get the lavs and the boom, and I give that off to the director or editor or whatever. They sync all that up, and then they get that back to me.
Okay.
And now my first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just balance the dialogue and EQ it.
Okay.
Right. Make that sound as good as possible. So the first thing is you want to make sure that your lavs and your boom are in phase. And
you're going to have to explain that.
Yeah, so that's a weird thing. You get one way you get teeny dialogue is that the distance from the sound source to the microphones, like sound does not travel as fast as light.
No.
So if you have a boom mic that's a couple feet away and a lav that's less than a foot, that microphone can be pushing while the boom is pulling. So all the microphone in it is just an element that vibrates back and forth with the sound waves.
Okay.
And so when the sound wave hits the lav first, it can hit the boom just a fraction of a second later. And then while one microphone is pushing, the other one's pulling.
Oh, so then they sort of start
canceling each other out.
Okay.
And so you have to go into your audio editing software. And I don't know if like Premiere Pro or DaVinci does this well. I know DaVinci has audio editing inside of it. But like in Audition or Pro Tools, you can just zoom right in to milliseconds. And you want to make sure that every the lav and the boom are as in sync as possible.
Okay.
And what'll happen is if you get it slid over in just the right way, and sometimes you have to flip the phase 180 degrees, which means it just takes the waveform and then it flips it
upside down.
So that happens a lot with lav microphones.
And that doesn't make people sound like they're speaking satanically backwards or in tongues
it
or Latin
might,
or anything?
But you'll notice it right away if it does.
Okay, so you can just take the waveform and just flip it completely, because you can't do that to a video and just flip it upside down and expect nobody to notice.
But all the audio is doing is telling the speaker to push and pull, right?
Okay.
So your microphone is pushing and pulling. It's recording it as a digital, which you zoom in on your audio software, you can just see the wave going up and down, and it has like all these micro hills and valleys.
Okay.
And so it's just telling it to push and pull. But if you have one microphone that's pushing and the other one that's pulling, and then you sync them up in your audio software, it just takes the average of all that. And so the average is nothing.
Muted.
Yeah, and so that's why you get weird, tinny dialogue sometimes. And it's usually because the lav microphone is 180 degrees out of phase, plus the distance that the lav is from the actor's mouth to the boom. And so there's software out there that'll automatically sync it. But usually if I end up having to use both lav and boom, I'll just go in and do a quick alignment, zoom in on it, and then slide it over.
Just manually tweak it. Don't trust the auto sync. Manually tweak it just a little bit.
Well, you can hear it. and it does take a while to be able to hear it. So if you're just starting out, you might not know what's going on there. But I'm telling you, just zoom in and get granular with it. So that's the first thing I do to clean it, to match things up, is if I'm mixing boom and lav, right? Then I do that. Sometimes I'll do one or the other. Usually I rely more on boom, and then I'll use the lav if I need it.
Okay, because the boom just sounds better? Or...
I like a boom mic better than a lav mic.
Okay, that's more of a personal preference.
Yeah, but you don't have clothing rustle. If you have somebody that operates the boom well, usually you're going to be fine with that. Okay. And then I'll EQ the lav to match the boom.
Oh, nice.
And you can do that in your audio. There's plugins that'll do it, that'll automatically match microphones, because every single microphone has a different equalization setting. And then there's also the proximity effect, right?
Okay, so depending on how far the actual vocal source is from the microphone itself, and then what the manufacturer, the size, the shape, the type, all of these things for the microphone itself also impact.
Yes.
Okay.
Microphones all sound different. And so usually lavs will be a little bit more muffled because they're underneath clothing.
Fair.
So you'll have to lift some of the high-end stuff because that's not penetrating their clothing and getting into the microphone. Plus, it's right next to their chest a lot of times.
Yeah.
And so it's picking up more bass.
Oh, okay.
And so you just kind of have to EQ to make them sound similar. And I do know on Audition, there's a segment in that where you can go into the waveform view, scan the entire take of somebody's dialogue, and it'll give you an average of where all the energy is and all the frequency spectrums. And then that way you can compare that to the same take on just the lav mic. And then you'll see where, this area needs more of a boost and this area needs more of a cut. And then you can put that into that channel on the EQ.
You mean like just kind of apply that as another EQ
this
level
is like,
on that
exactly.
on that particular channel or I don't know what that's.
So I'll have like a boom track and then I'll have a lav track.
Okay.
And then on the lav track, I'll look at how much different that is from the boom as an average. Obviously, you have to get granular on all this stuff. But, as a starting point, I'll be like, okay, well, I need to lift these high frequencies to match my boom.
Okay.
So that's how I do the EQ. This is actually be a good time to talk about the time-saving hack that I have for everybody before I get into the next thing.
Okay.
And that is something that I did in Dive as well, which was to hide microphones to get action that you can't get. So I hide microphones on set to get sound that needs to appear on camera that I can't get with just a boom or a lav talent.
Okay.
So for example, on Dive, I had a boom mic hidden behind the bar so that I could pick up the bartender's footsteps.
Yeah, which actually ended up being incredibly important because we just had it stuck on that static shot.
Yeah.
And so when you saw the bartender leave, we actually had the footsteps of him not just exiting the frame, but then continuing to walk even farther away, which meant that now we know these two are completely alone. The bartender is absolutely gone. Mm-hmm. So that actually sold the story and was completely brilliant. Thank you again for doing that.
Yeah, no problem. It's really helpful because it saves a lot of time in post.
Yeah, you didn't have to Foley a bunch of footsteps.
No, exactly, or use unnatural sounding Foley. So let me
We
keep
could have put
going
the
on.
bartender in heels. That would have been fun.
I just realized this might be another long episode again because we're only on 0.2 out of 6 points here. But so dialogue, you want to EQ so that your mic sounds similar. You want everything to sound similar.
Yeah.
You might have to add a little bit of reverb to dialogue as well if you're switching between boom and lav. So I'll do that as well on the lav track.
And that's just an effect you can drag and drop on and then adjust?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's tricky a little bit, but they're called impulses. You can reference reverb impulses, which if you're slating, you just need a clean click. And if you keep your boom in position where it's going to be roughly in relation to the talent's mouth, if you have that same distance on the slate, that click you can turn into an impulse in post, put it into your reverb plugin, and then feather that in so that way the lav might need a little bit more reverb because it's closer to the actor's mouth. Like I said, it might not be picking up as much of the room.
Okay.
So it'll build a custom one so you don't just get like something that's like crazy guitar reverb, which if you mess around with the plugins, you'll hear it be like, that sounds totally unnatural. That's way too much.
Okay.
So
that's nice that you can set your own sort of like pattern or template impulse and then throw that on there. Okay.
Yeah, and then the nice thing is usually you have it as long as everybody's quiet after the slates clacks.
So further proof that the 2AC is very, very important.
Yes.
You call it, then you mark it, then you walk away.
Yeah, just give it a
And
beat.
make sure nobody's talking while you're doing it.
Then it'll be totally fine. And then the next thing I do with the dialogue, actually one of the first things I do, this is all actually just kind of like at the same time, but you want to clean up noisy dialogue, right? You want to clean out the background noise, and then you want to add your room tone that you're going to use for it.
That you captured on set with nobody talking or
hopefully,
moving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully you have that room tone. Or you can, if you clean it, if it's quiet enough and you can just kind of remove most of that sound, you can get away with adding different room tone in post.
Nice.
But so that's why phasing is super important. So AI, I'm not quite sure how that works, but the older tools, all you would do is capture a sound print.
Yeah.
And then it would basically play that sound print back over the file 180 degrees out of phase.
Yeah.
So it would just take whatever that noise is and then flip flip it so that the average is nothing.
Yeah, and 10-year-old me was so excited to figure out how to do that because suddenly now my camcorder audio is just fine.
Yeah.
No,
but the other issue,
it's not.
the other issue too, is when you're doing that, you're removing some of those frequencies from actors' mouths.
Yeah.
Which is why if you have uncompeting frequencies that are noisy, like a low hum, that's not going to be attacking people's vocals as much. But if you have something that's like a buzz that's in the vocal range, and then you try to remove that, that's when you're going to get that weird warbly effect on people's mouths or on people's dialogue when you play it back.
Yeah.
So you just got to be careful with that. And AI pushes it really far. I know DaVinci, it starts to sound unnatural if you hit it if you have too much noise in the dialogue. Then it's just you really can't do much. And Premiere adds words. Their AI feature will just like add syllables and things like that.
What?
Yeah. So if you're using Premiere Pro, because I've messed with that, if it's really noisy, and you're trying to remove too much of it, it'll just start speaking gobbledygook. The AI makes up words.
So it does think that it hears things.
Yeah,
there are
it's
ghosts,
hallucinating.
and AI just found them.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's it. That's what it means. It has nothing to do with just this technological algorithm is trying to make something out of nothing. It's ghosts. It's definitely ghosts.
It's ghosts. So it'll pick up, boom mics will pick up ghosts on set, and then an AI is recognizing that.
Okay.
So that's the dialogue cleanup. And I think that's where a lot of people, which I myself got distracted the first time I tried to do audio on the Lower Gentry Studios feature film in post, was I cleaned up all the dialogue and then had the room tone in there. And that's not done. Like, you're not done.
Are you sure? It sounds done.
No.
You can hear everyone.
This is where things like, if you want to level up your audio game, you got to do a lot more than that. And
Okay.
that's the difference between the indie feature or the indie films that we see at the high tier festivals
Yeah.
versus the mid or low tier. Like, nobody skips out on those things on audio.
Because sound design is an important other aspect
Yeah.
of your whole story here. So
Which we've seen some great looking films at some of the film festivals, but at the same time the audio is off, and it's like, well, this is not going to get screened
no,
at
just a
an
little bit.
Academy qualifying festival, unfortunately.
Probably not, which is sad, 'cause
Mm-hmm.
especially if it was like a really good story and everything. But
Yeah, you
the-
got to have
the
clean
audio-
sound. So the soundscape is the term I'm using for just all the realistic sounds in the environment.
Okay, so this is a chair being pulled out, somebody
Yeah.
setting a glass down, the noise of a toothbrush if you're brushing your teeth.
Yes.
Okay.
So you want to make sure if you see it in the frame, if it makes a sound, add the sound.
That seems like a really simple rule to follow.
Yeah, but
I like that.
it can get tedious, right? If
Yeah.
somebody's walking and the placement was wrong, or you were using lavs and it's a quiet area and you can't hear their footsteps, it's unnatural. So you might need to add footsteps to that, and it takes a lot of time.
That does take a lot of time.
Or if somebody was shooting MOS, mit out sound, and it was just an insert shot and somebody sets their glass down and it gets silent. You need to insert that shot. You need to get the sound effect for that, which
Yeah.
sound effects libraries are not that expensive any longer. Like
Really?
you can get some. I mean, there's like monthly ones, which obviously like I have opinions about that because I hate monthly everything, but because everybody just tries to, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. So. But you can actually purchase sound effects libraries, so it's like a one-time buy, and some of them
Okay.
are a little bit more expensive. But check it out, look at reviews. I don't want to give anybody any recommendations on sound effects libraries because I've built my own
Yeah.
over the years. So
But you did also recommend for student projects or non-commercial projects, is it the BBC library?
oh yeah, the BBC library does have
but
one.
that's
yeah.
a really good one too. So if you're just getting started and you know this isn't commercial work, and
Yeah.
or especially for a student film or something, that might be a good place to start. So you can at least try playing with some of those sound
yeah,
effects.
mess around with them. But it's important. So we're still 3 steps in, and this is just like all the naturalistic capture
Yeah.
of everything. And this is just grunt work. Like this is not
This doesn't
fancy.
feel like high capital A art.
No, and that's 90% of what sound for film is. Like
Yeah.
the people that really most of the people that get really into sound end up in the music realm
Yeah.
because that's mostly creative. And when they're doing their sound mixing, it's mostly creative. In film, you just, obviously there's some surrealistic movies out there and you get to do some fun stuff.
Yeah.
But you don't want the sound pulling you out of what's going on. You want it amplifying what's happening or not distracting.
Okay.
And so step one is to make it not distracting, right?
Yes.
Balance your dialogue. I didn't even mention that, you can add compression or whatever, but you want to make sure that all the dialogue is audible, right?
Yeah.
And you don't want it to be too loud in one scene and too quiet in the other. You want it consistent.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things. Make sure that that's all clean. Get your room tone in there. Make your actual soundscape with the sound effects that match what's going on screen. Add more layers of ambience, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
If people are outside and they're in a city, there's going to be crowds moving around.
There's going to
You're gonna
be
picking,
traffic.
Yeah, and that's another safety aspect too. If it's loud and you're filming in a city, have the actors project.
Yeah.
Make sure that they can get over it. And then you can add crowd and traffic noise in post too to help mask that out, because if you get clean enough dialogue, it will cut through.
Yeah.
And you can actually turn up the background noise for that scene for that purpose.
That is really nice.
So because you don't want it to sound like it's in a studio.
No, that's the goal, is that it's supposed to feel like you're being dropped into this moment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so after those, that's when you get into, well, then I do sound design stuff after that, right? And that's what I consider the creative aspect of things.
Okay.
Like, we get like you're lost in someone's head, right?
Yeah.
So, there's going to be sound effects, or maybe the dialogue in that scene suddenly sounds really muffled because you have a close up on an actor's face.
Oh, and we're not listening to other people around
Yeah.
them anymore. We're just focusing on the world that they're processing.
Yeah. Or
Okay.
risers, that whoop, like that they have in action
Can you
movies
give
or
an
whatever.
example of that again? One more time.
Whoop.
Thank you.
Those whoops, add some whoops or whatever sound effects that are completely unnatural that accentuate what's happening.
The story. They serve the
Yeah.
story.
Like,
Okay.
for example, a film that I was working on recently with our friend Mark, he wanted to have an intense part with this actor reading this intense poem.
Yeah.
And so he wanted like heartbeat sounds. And so we sat down and got that all mixed exactly how he wanted to have it. But that's
Nice.
it's not something you would hear in real life.
No,
right?
you're not going to hear the person's actual heartbeat, but that's the beauty of a movie.
It's accentuating a feeling, and that's like the sound design thing, or creating monster roars, that type of thing.
Yeah.
That's what I would consider sound design. So
Okay.
then after that's done, that's when you usually
Because
have to.
that's step 4.
That's step 4. Yes. And then once that's done, because I dread it, that's when you get to ADR, which is automatic dialogue replacement, which is when you
Yay.
have the actors come in and re-record lines that aren't clean enough, or lines that need to be added later on,
Or lines that have completely changed.
or lines that have totally changed. Yes. So that happens sometimes, and it's not fun. It's really tricky because you have the performance to handle,
Yeah.
and then also EQing it to make it sound natural.
Yeah.
So performance, you want to get the director there.
And maybe give the actors a little bit of a heads up,
Yeah.
because it's probably been who knows how many months since they played this character, and they might
For
want
sure.
a little bit of time to get back into it again.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if it was one that had a lot of like accentuated like dialects or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. You want them to be prepped.
Yes.
Because otherwise it's going to sound, that's one way it can sound unnatural. Right?
Yeah.
And then as an audio engineer, there's no way to fix it. As an audio mixer,
Yeah.
there's no way that you can correct that in post. If the delivery's unnatural, you're screwed.
Give it 3 years, AI will be able to do it for you. But
Yeah.
for right now, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah, for right now, you got to just get it the way it was delivered on set, or the way it should have been delivered on set. So with that, I try to use the same microphone in a similar environment when I do the ADR, so that I can alleviate some of the reverb and EQ that you need to add in post.
Okay.
But like, we're in a studio now. If I were to record like ADR in here, I would definitely have to add reverb.
Yeah.
Or if you're like outside, maybe a little bit of a delay, which is kind of like an echo, like a little, to make it seem like the space is bigger, depending on where you're
Okay.
filming. So same thing again, like matching the EQ of your lav to the boom. You do the same thing
And
with
match.
the ADR. Yeah, and then insert that.
And ideally, if possible, especially if the majority of your audio from the film was, say, from a boom mic,
Yeah.
Is it a better choice to use that same type of mic in the recording? Okay, just so that way
you're just going to be fighting with yourself in most cases if you get.
I do that every day.
Yeah, and we try to not fight with ourselves too much. That's our goal with this podcast. It's already brutal enough being an indie filmmaker. We don't want to just be in constant battle. So yeah, ADR, I try to avoid it at all costs. There's usually ways to fix things if you don't need to change lines. And I mean, one of the examples is I did post audio for a film, and there was no way to get people in for recording because they were completely out of the area. And it just needed to get done. And it was somebody that was not a pro running the boom mic, so it was all over the place. It was off axis, and what that means is like the microphone was not pointed at the talent sometimes, and so then you have to do a lot of work there, which means like changing an EQ and slowly fading it in and fading it out. There's a lot of work that goes into that type of stuff, but you can avoid it a lot of times as long as it's like somewhat clean. And one of the hacks I've learned on indie films, which you can't do for, high budget stuff, is to just turn up the ambience. Make it
covered up.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if there's a weird click and pop and you can't quite clean it all out, like establish sound effects in the scene. Like
add a dog barking early on.
Or car driving by, dog barking. Like if you've established some of this stuff, you can just be like, I'm going to call back to that sound effect.
And it's coming back. There's another car driving by.
Feather it in lightly because the audience doesn't quite notice it.
Nice.
As long as it's not like, like a blaring horn or something like that. But
it's not a truck backing up, like that beeping noise.
Exactly.
Okay.
There's just a lot of fun ways to mess up indie film audio.
I assume this is all just terrifying to me, if I'm being honest. It's obvious I don't do location sound, but this is just terrifying.
It's not that bad. It's important, I feel like, for filmmakers to dabble in it a little bit so that they have some language.
Yeah.
To be able to handle these situations and understand what's going on. Because when I'm on an indie film set, usually I'm not noticed, right? Like unless there's a problem, it's my job to bring up the problems.
Yeah.
And usually I'm a one-man band when I'm on a film set too.
And that's not uncommon either.
Yeah, I've actually been on a commercial set. It was really funny. I think it was like 10 people in the camera department.
Dang.
And I was the only person
on
set with audio.
Yep.
It was really fun. And I took a picture of all these people like clamoring around the script truck and then sent it to one of my audio friends. I'm like, this is camera department. Guess how many people are in audio department today? And it was me. So it's not abnormal when you're on a film set. But the funny thing is it's like, if the audio's bad, nobody's going to listen to nobody's going to watch what you're making. So
No.
I guess I should go back to my point. Like as a director, I think it's really important to keep that in mind. And you're very audio forward when I work with you. And and obviously my brother is very audio forward. And I've worked with some audio forward directors. And the thing is then the film ends up being that much better.
Yeah. And
the final finished film is.
I do feel like a lot of directors only become really cognizant of sound because they have at least one project where it was awful.
Yeah.
And they know better now.
Yeah, which if you go to film school, you get that knocked out like right when you're doing your student films.
You usually do, which is nice.
If you're self-trained, like you just bang your head on the wall.
Yep.
Fight with yourself.
Great. The way I like to think of it whenever I'm directing anything is I know that I hired the best people to do this, which means now I need to listen to them.
Yeah.
So on set, if I love to take, but my DP says, didn't look right, we got a weird like flash or reflection or something, we got to go again, then we got to go again. If my sound person says, hey, sorry, there was a truck going by and it'll definitely be noticeable, we can't cover that, we're going to go again. It doesn't matter how much I love the take. It means we can't use the take, so it doesn't matter if it was good. It's
burnt in.
Yep.
If the audio's burnt in when you record it on set, the image is burnt in, and it's if there's a U-Haul truck that like pulled in and parked right outside of the frame or right into the frame, right?
Yeah.
And you're shooting something, the director's not going to take it's going to be 2 seconds and be like, we need to reframe this. We can't have that U-Haul truck.
We probably don't want
in
that.
this shot, but you need to listen to your location sound recorders if they're like, that was a really loud bang or a really loud noise or whatever. We need to retake this.
By.
The plane is too much, take the time to listen because that's burned in and it's just going to deteriorate the quality just as quickly. But,
It's
and
harder.
you'll notice it in post.
You will, but you'll be like, well, I think we can get by with this on set. And then you will regret it later. So just save yourself the time, trust the people that you brought onto your set, and listen to them.
Yes.
They know what they're doing.
We're really preaching today.
We are. This feels very preachy.
But I do promise, like, this is stuff that I've screwed up every step along the way. And it's been humbling to try to learn how to, like, polish this stuff as best I can. I'm not anywhere close to the caliber of some of the audio people that I've worked with that are professionals that went to school for this or, I've associated with, but never actually work with them. But,
because there's never more than one sound person on a set. So
True. But we've won a couple of awards for the film sound that we've done. So it's not hopefully I can pass for somewhat decent.
I think you can.
Yeah.
I think you can. Based on just how in demand you are in the area alone, I think we can say that.
Yeah, there's also supply demand curve there. So the supply is slow. So the last thing I just want to touch on real quick and then we can wrap up here is score, which we did a whole episode with Jesse.
Yes.
About score. And you can check that out. That is season 2, episode 9. So that was only like 10 episodes ago. So if you haven't seen that one, definitely listen to that if you want some tips on score. And then
how to communicate with a composer. It's not just about score. It's about communicating with your composer to make sure you get the score that you want.
Exactly. And that's a good one. And what I do end up doing then is you adjust the level of the score to make sure that it's not overwhelming and make sure that it's present enough. And those are just called automation clips, right? And that just, you turn it up, keyframing, you turn it up, you turn it down. And then another nice trick, if you're just starting out, you want to be careful with, you can just EQ down around 1,000 hertz. Go to your parametric EQ, drop that down slightly, and then that way you can turn the music up more, and it's not competing as much with speech.
Oh, that's really nice. Because I do hate it when you'll hear sometimes, and maybe it's just not listening to it on the right speakers. I know, because if anything's mixed in 5.1 or 7.1 or whatever, that changes it. But if you're listening to something where the music gets really, really loud and dramatic and intense, and I love that. I love being drawn into it. But then I'm like, now they're talking, and I think they're saying really important things, and I am losing half of what they're saying here. It just gets muddy. Yeah. Mixed in with that music.
Yeah.
So.
You can just EQ some of those ranges that are competing with the vocals out on the EQ on that score track.
That's nice.
And you should be able to hear it, but then you want to turn it down. Like,
if you can't hear the dialogue, the music's too loud.
I do want to say, like, I am critical of some of those action films that have been coming out recently where it is really hard to hear the dialogue. I don't like that. I don't like to have to go to my stereo system and have to crank up the center channel, which is the one where the dialogue comes out, and adjust it for every single movie I watch, because some of them you can barely hear it, and some of them then all of a sudden it's blasting. But hey, that's not.
But that's a personal gripe.
That's the way it works. So that's what I got. If you all have questions about film sound, please feel free to leave a comment, and I can do my best to answer them or look up the answer.
Or if you're a fellow sound person or sound engineer or just sound aficionado, please feel free to comment and let us know your favorite tips and tricks. Because there aren't a lot of good sound tutorials and insights and details on the internet. It's
hard to find a start to finish way to. It's not. There's no Bob Ross out there that's gonna do a film sound tutorial. Unless somebody out there, if you have a channel or if you have something that works, comment. Let us know that. But there's all sorts
Comment below, and we will throw in a little bit of money for your first YouTube ad to make sure that more people know you're out there doing your tutorials.
There we go.
Don't worry, it won't be much money, but it will be some.
We'll chip in on that one because it's important. All right, shall we talk about the featured filmmaker of the week?
Absolutely. We have Tom Hughes this week, and it's kind of a horror film.
Nice.
So I was going to talk about it.
Go for it.
Okay. So Tom Hughes' first feature is a no-budget Bigfoot film made with a 2-person crew. On the night they went out to the forest to get pickup shots, they realized they forgot to bring Bigfoot's head, which is a little bit of a problem. They shot the creature from the waist down, and luckily, it worked out really well. Tom's films are made with budgets of around £500, where he handles writing, producing, acting, directing, editing, and promoting his films all by himself. So if you would like to find out more about the found footage Bigfoot film Fox Hollow.
That's a lot of F's.
It was. That's why I went slower. I did not want to screw that up, but Fox Hollow is the name. You can follow at ritual_video or check out this really sweet site called povhorror.com, which is apparently just a site dedicated to found footage horror movies.
Yeah.
So I'm also going to say thanks, Tom, for letting me know that that website exists.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Not that I needed to learn that.
All these streaming platforms coming up, but the ones that support indie film, kudos.
Absolutely.
We dig it.
Yes.
All right. If you want to be a featured filmmaker, go to indiefilmpodcast.com/submit, and you can submit to be our featured filmmaker of the week. And with that, shall we succinctly say farewell?
I think so.
Goodbye.